Whew. Hey, man. Welcome to the first ever podcast episode of Button Mashers. That's right, Button Mashers. Play the HG. Happy game. That's right, an idea from one of our channel members, Mindstormer. He gave me the idea to put that little HG at the bottom for the period. But guys, welcome. This is the first actual episode. I'm so excited for this episode because I'm going to give you kind of like the background on like how I got into gaming, and we're just going to it's going to be a story, a really long story about kind of me traveling through the ages of how I got into gaming and why it's so powerful. And I think that, you know, it's just, you know, we're going to get off to a fun start. Couple things of business. One, yes, this is on the normal channel. Go ahead and hit subscribe. Be a part of this. Be a part of this wonderful thing. There's more than just the podcast that lives here. Subscribe, like, all that stuff, whatever. So yes, this is a part of the normal channel. Just go ahead, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Just be a part of it. Be a part of this. There's so much stuff. I get it. But it helps. It helps out a ton. And then we just introduced, and I say we because really it's me, but whatever. We as the community, I see this as a community. I don't see this as a me, right? It's just all of us. I'm introducing Patreon. I am not going to be pushing the channel memberships as much, transitioning over to Patreon because it gives me access and the ability to give more stuff and just have a better community built out there. There's a few different tiers. There's two very specific ones and then one that's just kind of out of reach for a lot of people and unnecessary. I just put it because some people are crazy. There is a entry-level tier that is the same as the channel memberships here, just $5. It's player 2, and you'll get access to all of these Button Mashers episodes. They'll stay cataloged on there, but they also will release a day early for you. So you'll be able to watch these a day early before everyone else gets it, if that's something you're into, getting that exclusive day early thing. And also, once a month, I'm going to be releasing an exclusive episode just for our Button Mashers, not for our Button Mashers, just for our player 2 and player 1 audience, right? The Patreon audience. And that's going to be something that's just specifically for you guys. And then thing number 2, the tier number 2 is player 1. The player 1 thing is more, 19, and that allows you to get 15% off of all merchandising purchases like this mug, and also I have t-shirt and sweatshirt of this same logo, as well as you'll get a special thank you at the end of every single Button Mashers episode and some videos, standalone videos on the YouTube channel with your name at the end as one of the producers and one of the people who is, financially you're helping me out quite a bit. It really does help. And I'm transitioning over to Patreon because like as a career move and I'm trying to build a career on this platform and on just in general when it comes to video games, Patreon does have a little bit more flexibility and benefits me as a creator more. So I figured, I'm still going to maintain the same pricing as I have already on this channel, but Patreon allows me to create some tiers and do different things there that are just going to benefit me, as well as create a space for me to help create content and deliver it to you guys, and it just feels a lot more streamlined. So, that's the Patreon pitch. But enough of that nonsense. I'm gonna take a sip of this sparkling water, and then we're gonna get into the history of gaming for me and how this all, like, why I'm so passionate about gaming. Oh my gosh, I love sparkling water. Okay, so it all starts going back to, I'm going to burp a lot. I can't drink that sparkling water. Anyway, so it all starts back when I was really young. Now, just to mind you, this is going to be all primarily console gaming because PC gaming wasn't something I ever got into. I played computer games, but I never was a PC gamer, right? The longest time I had, I would say that I played games pretty aggressively on the PC or on the, for me it was Mac, was when World of Warcraft came out back in like 2006, I think. Whether it came out in 2006, I got into it in 2006 because I finally had a computer that was more powerful and I could do it. I played always on a laptop. I was a huge laptop user. But what we would do is I worked at a coffee shop, right? I've been everything under the sun, but a barista I've been for a long time. I worked at a coffee shop. This is my first ever coffee shop, Tully's Coffee, and where I was right across the street from my high school. So I'd leave high school, go to this coffee shop and work, my shift. But my best friends from high school at the time were, also working there too. It was an extremely awesome experience, right? My boss, whose name wasn't Mouse, but she went by Mouse, She was super cool. She hired myself, and then she goes, now tell me who your friends are, and if they want a job, I'll hire them. So it was myself, my buddy from high school, Adam, another friend, Chad, someone who had already worked there, Chelsea, but she played World of Warcraft. We were all really into World of Warcraft. My other friend at the time, Tristan, he didn't work there, but he still played too. What we would do is we would all show up to work with our laptops, and the rule was we couldn't just ignore people. We had to, of course, do our jobs. But if it was slow and we could get away with it, we could play while we were working. Now, we wouldn't really go and do any quests or anything, but what we would do is we would, go and farm materials and then sell stuff in the auction house and do kind of the boring stuff while we were working, stuff that was more time consuming and didn't really require much attention. And then, we would stay late, lock up, close the shop down, pull down the blinders, and then stick around and use the Wi-Fi and play video games together, longer and longer and longer. And that just is what we did. And that was for a long time. We ended up working there for a few years, at the end of my high school time and then into the first year or so of community college. And that was the most PC gaming I did. It was a blast. But here's the thing, though. I always played next to someone. It was never an experience where I was playing online with my friends. Now, that did happen, but it wasn't often. In fact, most of the time when we played, because we all had laptops, we'd all just go to one of the houses and then play there for a few hours. It wasn't these 10, 15, 20-hour binges that everyone was doing back then. It was 5 or 6 at a time. Sometimes my buddy would be like, hey, come over, stay the night. We'll get a bunch of people over, and then we'll just play. We'll have a LAN party. And those days were fun. We had such a blast doing that kind of stuff. But it just never manifested into much more than that. But my gaming didn't start there. My gaming started far earlier, when I was very little. Honestly, it was as early as I can remember. My dad had a Game Boy, the original Game Boy, the one that was released in 89. Whether he had it in 89, I was born in 89, or later, I don't know. But I can remember, we were living in Washington. He worked and did some freelance work for Nintendo as a graphic designer. And he would leave for work in the morning, and I was very sad when my dad would leave. And his way of being like, hey, it's okay, I'll be back, was he would give me the Game Boy. And the deal was I could play Game Boy when he was at work, and then he gets to play it when he gets home. And so I had this gray Game Boy, this big, fat, chunky Game Boy, which was massive. And there were 3 games that we had. I think we had 4, but there were only 3 I played pretty aggressively. We had the original Tetris. We had Kirby Dream World, which I really liked playing that game. We had Super Mario Land 1 and Super Mario Land 2. And the 3 I played were Kirby Dream World, Super Mario Land 1, and Super Mario Land 2. Mostly, though, I played Super Mario Land 2. And that was the game that my dad and I played pretty consistently together. And by together, I mean I would play, and then he would play, and then I would play, and then he would play. And we, would compete to see who could get, the different things, right? I think we had to get gold coins and just get through the level. Not the level, but get through the game, and just who could beat the game first. And I just remember it being such a awesome experience, and we would share in this experience. And it was super, super cool. And then we got the Game Boy Pocket, which with the Game Boy Pocket, what that allowed us to do was no longer play on such a massive Game Boy, which we got a second system, right? We never got rid of the original Game Boy. We got the Game Boy Pocket. And with the Game Boy Pocket, my dad would, he would use the normal Game Boy. I would use the Game Boy Pocket, but it wasn't mine. It was his. And so that was always the thing. It's this isn't yours, this is mine, and I'm letting you use it. And with that, we got, a couple extra games here and there. But then there was this moment where everything changed. And now I don't remember exactly the details. I choose to remember it a specific way, but it could have been one of these 2 situations. One is the original Game Boy Pocket that my dad had broke, and he sent it in to get repaired. We had friends that worked at Nintendo. So whether it got repaired or refurbished, we got a refurbished one back. I don't know. That's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 was my dad was able to purchase a second Game Boy Pocket, and a refurbished one, and got rid of the original Big Boy Game Boy, which I wish we would have held on to now looking back. And I'm trying to, find all these systems now, and they're so expensive. But, it's one of those two instances. Either whichever. The one I choose to remember is that he got rid of the original Game Boy and he got a second Game Boy Pocket. At any rate, here we were, sitting for my birthday at Red Robin. And I'm given a box, right? Not anything, a brown box, right? A brown box that you open up. There's the two little things. There's two little things that slide into the side. You open it up and then just, right? There's no hinge. There's no sound. I don't know why I made a sound, but you know the box, right? It was just this brown box. For me it was probably much bigger, but I'm bigger now. But it's this brown box, and in that box, and this is where everything was just so. This is it. Was a Game Boy. A Game Boy Pocket with Donkey Kong Land. And the reason why I remember that game is because it was a yellow cartridge. All my other cartridges were gray. This one was yellow. Donkey Kong Land and 9 Ken Griffey Jr. cards. At the time, again, we were living in Seattle, so the Mariners were huge. Ken Griffey Jr. was on the team, and I was really into it. I completely lost my passion for sports really early on, but for some reason I was really into Ken Griffey Jr., as was every kid at that time. Anyway, so there it was. And this was not a Game Boy that my dad got for us to use. This was a Game Boy for me to use. It was my first actual system. And I remember this being such a special moment for me. I had my own Game Boy. And I don't remember if it was before or after I received my first Game Boy that we also had a Super Nintendo, but we had one. We had gotten a Super Nintendo, and I had started to play different games with the Super Nintendo. I really liked Pilot Wings for some reason, but we had Super Mario All-Stars, which I loved that game. And my favorite Mario game of all time is Super Mario World. And I used to play that game like crazy. It was so tough, and for me at least at that age, it was very hard. And so that was a really, really fun game for me. But that was our family system, right? My dad would use it too. We played video games. He wouldn't use it as much as I did, of course, but he played that. But this was mine. I didn't have to take turns. I could use this whenever I wanted, whenever I was allowed to. I could use it, right? Because I wasn't always allowed to play video games. It was like you could play this, you have to play outside, but then you can play this, sometimes. But this was my system, mine to use. And from there, my collection grew, right? I got Zelda, and this is where, for me, a lot changed. Because I didn't have A Link to the Past. I never played this Super Nintendo version of Zelda. I never owned that game. I owned Mario games. I loved, there's Super Mario All-Stars, but then there's Kirby Superstars, which I loved that game. I had Mario Kart. I had so many. I remember this bin that we just had all the cartridges in. I remember I used to slam that middle button in between the reset and the turn on and off, and it would just launch the card up in the air, and I would catch it and blow it, lick my finger, just all the different things you would do to get the cartridge to work. But I had the system, and it was mine, and it was just so this Nintendo, this Game Boy. And that was when, for me, video games became more than just something I did. I was like, this is something I want to have on me at all times. This is something I want to be able to just like pull the handle out, and I'm just going to play a little bit of video games right now. Press save and then put it away. And I remember the first Zelda game I played was actually Link's Awakening, and that was on the Game Boy, and that was something that completely changed the way I viewed video games. Again, as I said, I don't think I'm even centered. I can't believe this whole time I've been doing this, I'm not centered. Why didn't you guys tell me? Again, as I said, I didn't have the Zelda game on the Super Nintendo. It was all on the normal Game Boy. So that was my first ever, and I remember the whole game was so tough, challenging. You didn't really get told where you need to go. You had to figure it out, and it was, for me, such a huge step in technology and storytelling, and I was so drawn in, right? Because you have the linear story that you get with Mario, and the story isn't really that deep. Okay, you have to save a princess. The talking is very little. There's not much. Donkey Kong a little bit more, but even still, you go moving left to right, up and down a little bit, and just to jump on stuff. But that's it. It's a side-scrolling game, but not Zelda. There's a story. there's an owl, there's different things that talk to you. There's a collection. You have to get, you have to get different things and you have to pass them around. You have to collect seashells. There was so much. And it was my first experience with RPGs. And from there, I got into RPGs a little bit differently, right? So again, I didn't have the Zelda game for the Super Nintendo. I actually got Chrono Trigger. I believe it was Chrono Trigger. Was it Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross? One of the two. One was PlayStation, the other was Super Nintendo. And I had never had a PlayStation 1. So it was just like that Super Nintendo. I think it was Chrono. I think it's Chrono Trigger, right? Was it SNES Chrono Trigger? Yeah, Chrono Trigger. That game was super dope. I really enjoyed that a lot. And so this is something that really just like changed the way that I interacted with games, with these RPGs. I was like, this is a crazy story. And then I remember getting the Game Boy Color next, which was really cool. I was like, oh my gosh, it's in color. And then for Game Boy Color, I repurchased Zelda Link's Awakening DX, which would have this color dungeon. And I was like, this is unreal. I'm having this color experience in my hand. And for me, the handhelds really were where a lot of my gaming gravitated. I've always loved handhelds because I could take games with me, right? We didn't have phones like this growing up. Now you can play any game whenever you want on this thing. Even with like stuff like Game Pass, Xbox game, you can play Halo on this thing, which is unreal, by the way. This is uncomfortable. There we go. And so, okay, I gotta take a sip of this. And then, like, I'm gonna have to burp again. There we go. So, yeah, handhelds were always the big thing. So here we are. We have a Game Boy Color. We have now. Was it? So before I got my Game Boy Color, this is an experience I'll never forget. We're in Washington, and our friend at the time, who worked for Nintendo, comes to our house and says, "Hey, I need to set something up in your den." That's where our TV was. So go ahead, leave. You set something up, and then you guys can come back in. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I left. My dad and I left. And again, my memory's foggy on this. I was really young. This was like back in 96, I believe. And so I was like 7. So I'd left. Maybe my dad and I left. I choose to remember that everyone left. It was just him in this room setting something up. And we come back and there's no system that we can see. There's just like a box. And in the box, from the box comes a controller, and this controller looks weird, right? I'm used to the Super Nintendo controller, right, which I have sitting on my desk, and it's this thing that is kind of, this looks like this, and you know what a Super Nintendo controller looks like, but and it has a D-pad, 4 buttons, and some shoulder buttons. That's it, and start and stop, right? Not start and select, and so this is what I'm used to, right? And then even I had friends who had the NES. Which I never had the NES. My first standalone console, plug-in-the-wall console was the Super Nintendo. Still, that's the controller, flat. I didn't have a PlayStation 1 or any sort of Sega system, which even with the Sega system, their controller was, somewhat rectangular or whatever, oval-shaped. Anyway, beside the point, we're getting too stuck on controllers. It was this Trident, and I was like, what is this? This seems so weird. Not only was it this Trident, but it had additional buttons. It had, and the buttons were different colors. The A button was blue. The B button was green. The start button was bright red. And then there was this joystick, as well as a D-pad. And then these weird little arrow buttons that were yellow. And then these shoulder buttons. And then this weird thing on the back that you could insert something, but there was nothing to insert. And then a trigger underneath called Z. And I was like, this is a bizarre thing, right? And granted, growing up, I wasn't wasn't that well off. I didn't find out till much later in life that we didn't live in the nicest neighborhood. We were just kind of getting by. But my memory is that of like the Sandlot life. Like I was like, we lived it. It was great life. It was awesome. But no, we were getting by. But my dad had connections, was able to, because of his his talent in his work in graphic design, he was able to do stuff in barter and different things like that to get things. And it was, he had this friend that worked for Nintendo. And so anyway, beside the point, we have this system, this weird box with this crazy controller. And then all of a sudden, he turns it on our TV, not that big of a TV, right? CRT TV. We just hear, "It's a me, Mario." And I was like, what? Mario's talking? What is going on? And there it is. The first ever, for me, completely mind-bending, mind-blowing, can't believe what I'm seeing moment. And that was Super Mario 64. And I don't know if we got to see something super in advance, if this was a production model, if this was, a blockbuster demo system that he just had. Or if it was even just a normal release model and we just didn't have it right. I just remember not knowing what the system was because I couldn't see it, right? It was completely covered. And I just see this Mario. And I remember you could change and mess with his face, and we did that quite a bit. But this is where everything changed for me for video games, right? When I first, this is another moment for me. When the first moment for me was when I got my Game Boy, and it was now mine. And I no longer was sharing my passion for this or my excitement for video games with my dad, but it was actually mine. I could develop into my own. And that was a really, really life-changing experience for me in my video gaming life. And then when I saw Mario 64, and I remember going into the first level, jumping through a painting and being like, oh my gosh, hearing that da 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 da, and then flipping down and being in a 3D world, running up, seeing Goombas that weren't going side to side but walking, jump on them, they flatten, they disappear, coins pop out of them that are spinning on the ground. This blew my mind. I could not for the life of me believe what I was seeing. I was like, this is unbelievable. And I remember playing that for as long as I was allowed to play it, and then looking at my dad and being like, when are we going to get one of those? And I don't know when, I don't know how, and I don't know, I don't know how long after that moment, but we ended up getting a Nintendo 64. And with that Nintendo 64, we got Super Mario World. Not Super Mario, Super Mario 64. It wasn't called Super Mario World. That was the NES version. And we kept the NES as well. So at this point, I'm the kid, right? And, PlayStation was a thing, but I was not at all interested in PlayStation. Nintendo was my jam. And, partially because my dad played Nintendo. So he wasn't looking for a different, system. It's just what he knew. And there was nothing against that. But so we got the Nintendo. And at that point when it came to video game consoles, I feel like there was more of this, you kind of chose your lane and you stuck with it, because exclusives were, you weren't getting the same game across all systems, right? So you were getting stuff like, on Nintendo, you'd have Mario, you'd have Yoshi, Yoshi Story, Zelda, and then on, the PlayStation, you'd have stuff like, I guess Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross or Crossover or whatever, but you'd have Final Fantasy. You would have Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, which ended up, coming over to Nintendo too. But the crossover wasn't as much. You would play your system for these exclusives, right? I believe there's a couple, I think on PlayStation, I really liked this game. I never owned it. My buddies did. We had it was called Super Mega Man or something Mega Man. But it was an RPG version of Mega Man, which I remember being so cool because I ended up, and as you guys know on this channel, my passion for gaming is all about story. And so the hyper competitive shooters, I try to get into them for the channel and be like, this is popular. I can't. I don't like them. I like story. And so RPGs is where my heart always landed because I thought it was just so cool. And maybe because I'm bad at multiplayer, but what have you? It doesn't really matter. Super Mega Man, and then I think on the 64 is Mega Man 64. So there's those crossovers. But realistically, for me, when it came to playing video games, I'm sticking with Nintendo because I like all these different things. And I started getting into Pokemon on my Game Boy, and oh my gosh, I had Pokemon Blue. My friends had Pokemon Red. I played that to death. I thought it was the coolest game in the world. It was a blue cartridge, and the different color cartridges were always a huge thing for me. I remember when Pokemon Crystal came out, and I was like, this is a see-through cartridge. This is so cool. But it was just that moment when I saw Mario moving around. I'm like, this is something special. This is something unreal. And that was, when my passion for video games became stronger. And it was, yes, I liked playing these things. And there was an element of it that I was just like, yeah, I got to play it. But there was also an element of it that was like, I could feel that when I was interacting with this game and when I was interacting with these video games, there's something special here. This isn't just a thing. This isn't something to like melt my brain and make me dumb and just like not really want to do anything and lazy. Like there was something so special, and I could feel the power that was behind it. I could feel that like I'm not like watching something happen. I'm like making it, I'm interacting it. I am doing this. I am this. And I remember playing, just a tremendous amount of Mario 64, and then we got Star Fox, and that was when they introduced the Rumble Pack, and I was like, what is happening? You can make yourself feel the gameplay itself. Like you can feel when you get shot, and other games were enabling the Rumble Pack, and like you're like, oh my gosh, I am interacting with a game, and it is interacting with me. I was no longer just the input. I was no longer making my character move. My character was responding in physical form on my controller. I could feel the hits. I could feel getting shot by a laser. I could feel these things, and I was like, holy crap. It blew my mind. And at the time, that game was like $60, and like games were like $30 back then. And I was like, $60, but you get this massive chunky thing that you get to load into the back of your controller. And I was like, this is so cool. And I felt like the coolest kid on the block because I had a Nintendo 64 and a lot of my friends didn't. And so they would come over to play Nintendo 64, and we would, we had multiple controllers, and we'd play these games together. And it was just like this moment where I got to sit next to my buddies and play video games. And like we played outside a lot. We played tag, hide and seek, rollerbladed, skateboarded, you name it, we did it. But then we could come inside and interact with each other and play these games together. And that was such a huge part of playing console because I was next to someone. And again, I was too young to really get into video games back in like 98, 99 when I was playing the Nintendo 64. But Nintendo 64 carried me for a very long time. I didn't get into PlayStation. I didn't get into other systems. I knew they existed and friends of mine had them, but I was a Nintendo 64 gamer. I would rent the PlayStation 2 from Blockbuster because you could rent systems back then. And that was a lot of fun. Or my friends would bring over their PlayStation 2s. And I thought the PlayStation 2 was an incredible, incredible machine. I was like, whoa, this is powerful. This is insane. And at the time it was this really, really big thing. But PlayStation didn't have much draw for me until I found out. And this is where a lot of stuff changed in my gaming life. That Nintendo had adventure style RPGs and RPGs, but PlayStation had Japanese RPGs. And that was huge because the turn-based system, I don't know what it was, drew me in. And honestly, to date, I love JRPGs. I think they're great. I love the turn-based. There's so many memories with games. And so from here, from like the Nintendo 64, we're talking like, we're in like 2001, 99, 2000, 2001, that time period. From when I got the Nintendo 64, I started to, get, an allowance and stuff like that. I could save money. There was a store. It no longer exists. I think it was bought by GameStop, but it was called Funko Land. And I would always want to go with my dad to Funko Land because I could sell and trade games. I could say, oh, Dad, we're going to take these few games I no longer play anymore. We're going to sell them, and then we're going to buy this other game, and I'm going to spend $3 or $4, and I'm going to get this new game. And, I would trade. I wouldn't hold on to it. I would do this kind of trade thing. And for me, the value of a game was based on how long I could play it and the replay value, right? And I guess that still stays today. And games were so long back then, but I remember when we traded in, and I got my first console Zelda, and that was Ocarina of Time. And Ocarina of Time for me was the memories I have playing that game are just there's so many. And I'm not going to spend too much time just on that game because I could dedicate and may dedicate a whole podcast to just Ocarina of Time. But I remember playing through. I remember when the first mini temple, right? Because he didn't really hit temples until he was an adult. It's the first 3 different areas. There's the Deku forest or the Deku tree, and then you go to Death Mountain, and then finally go to the Zora domain, and do the fish. I forgot the name of the fish. The Jabu, I think is what it is. And So I remember when you completed the Deku tree and you're like, okay, I've saved the Deku tree. He dies. And you're just, that was when I was like, oh my gosh, this is intense. This is really intense. There's some stuff going on. And I just remember like feeling this, like, this is more than just, the top-down Zelda game that I played before. This is like actually a story. This is an intense story. There's emotion. There's this characters. Miss you. You're leaving the forest you've never left before, and your friend Saria is like, no, don't. I know you have to go. Please remember me. Like there was so many elements. I was older. I could understand things. And I was like, oh man, this is heavy. And then, I remember the first time I played the Shadow Temple with those hands that come down and take you up. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep for like 3 days. I was sleeping with the light on. I was terrified. Absolutely terrified. And like no other game had done that for me, where I was just like, oh man, this is intense. And my love for story came out of these games, right? And then moved from there, from Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask, the other Zelda game that came out for the Nintendo 64. And I didn't love it as much. And maybe because the collection aspect of it was so big, but also like the time going back and forth was a little bit confusing for me at that age. And just like I not confusing, but just like this is a weird mechanic. And that's when I started to have opinions about like mechanics in games, right? Not just like, oh, this is fun, but like, that's a weird way of playing through the full game, and like start to develop these preferences for styles of games, right? And different things like that. And there were so many different little itty bitty things in these games that I started to really, really grow fond of. And at that point, I think we had gotten rid of the Super Nintendo, and I had just had my Nintendo 64. And the one, I always had two systems. I had a plug-in console, right? Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, GameCube, stuff like that, and a handheld. And I always had a handheld. And there was a moment where I had transitioned from Nintendo to PlayStation, but I still kept up to date with my handhelds. So since the beginning of my experience, my first ever call mine handheld was a Game Boy Pocket. I went to color. I had a yellow Game Boy Color. The Game Boy Pocket was black. Yellow Game Boy Color. From the Game Boy Color, I went to the Game Boy Advance. I had the see-through orange, like ice blue, whatever they called it. I had the see-through one. From the Advance, I had an SP. And I would go as far to say Switch excluded, because the Nintendo Switch is introduction to a new style of system. So up until the Switch, the Game Boy Advance SP is hands down my favorite Nintendo product. I would even include the Switch for this right now, actually. It is my favorite Nintendo product of all time. I had 4 of them because I broke a lot of them. And, people always like talking about how they break stuff all the time. I broke them because I took them everywhere. I had, from the second the SP came out, okay, I had a Game Boy Advance. It was cool. I had like all the attachments, the top-down light, because backlights weren't like really a big thing. I had the Advance. The second the SP came out, I got it. And gosh, what color was my first SP? I think it was black. Yeah, it was black. And I had that. And then from there, they had a limited release one that looked like an NES one. So I had that, the GameStop one. And then I got a silver one and then a blue one. Those are the 4 colors I had. I never had the red one, which I have right now, which is a gift from one of the channel members, which I'm so thankful for. But the SP for me was such a powerful system for one reason. It was extremely portable. It's small. It was the smallest Game Boy that I had used. And it's small because it folds in half. And the fact that it folded in half meant I could keep it in my pocket. I could keep it wherever I wanted. I didn't have to keep it in my backpack. I could literally keep it in my pocket. And I did. I kept it in my pocket at all times. And because it folded in half, if I was in the middle of a game and I had to go, back to class or whatever, because at this point I was in high school, I could close it, turn the sound down, and just keep it in my pocket. And the game didn't have to turn off. It drained the battery, so I couldn't do that all day. But I could do that. And that was something that was like, oh my gosh, I could pause a game without turning it off. And that was a pretty huge thing for me. I remember playing Golden Sun and Fire Emblem and a lot of these other games on there. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, Pokemon Ruby was the one I chose, which is interesting because my first Pokemon was Pokemon Blue, and then my Game Boy Advance Pokemon was Pokemon Ruby. And then also I saw my Game Boy game and the Game Boy cartridges too that stuck out so far. So like the SP was something that I would say has always held such a strong place in my heart. And from the different consoles I had, I went from N64 to GameCube, and then from GameCube I actually went to PlayStation, and that was the point where I transitioned to PlayStation. I never owned a Wii until let me rephrase that. I didn't own a Wii till much later, and it was something that someone just gave to me. Like, I'm getting rid of this. Do you want? I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. The Wii just never appealed to me. The motion controls. And so I also never owned a Wii U. So those two systems I didn't own. I do own a Wii U now. And, I know that there's elements of the Wii and the Wii U that, were missed. But for me, always like the traditional gaming experience for me was the handheld, that feeling of a controller, right? The motion controls was cool. I played Wii Sports with friends, and at this point I was like, outside of high school, I played Wii Sports with friends and whatever, but it just wasn't that big of a deal for me. So at this point I had, switched over to PlayStation, and I was playing games like Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy X, which I logged hundreds of hours in Final Fantasy X. I remember crying during those games, during the emotional parts, like feeling truly emotionally tied to characters. Playing games like, this some more shooters, getting involved in getting, Red Faction 2 was a fun one we like to play a lot. Loving the Ratchet and Clank series, and really finding my passion for storytelling and my passion for story. And so, that was my PlayStation 2. I got a PlayStation 3. And then at this point, I'm on my own, right? Outside of high school, college, and I can start buying stuff. Middle of high school, I was buying stuff for myself anyway. But I'm out, right? I'm doing my own thing, and I no longer have to just own one system. I can own multiple systems if I want. So then I had a Nintendo system and a PlayStation system. But my Nintendo system was the GameCube, because with GameCube, I had games, old school games I really, really enjoyed. And my PlayStation system was more advanced. And so I kind of just was like, well, I'm not using the GameCube anymore, so whatever. And that's when my Nintendo experience turned into the handheld experience. So I no longer played, I didn't play Wii, I didn't play Wii U. I had a 3DS, and that was, or actually maybe at that time it was just the DS. Or the DSi, or the DS Lite. I don't remember. I just remember the DS was so massive, and I was like, this is way too big. And then they came out with like the DS Lite, and then the DSi. Yeah. And so my console experience was PlayStation. My handheld experience was Game Boy. I also had the PlayStation Portable for a short while. I thought that was the coolest system ever. I still think it's so cool. I guess it was just like ahead of its time. And that was kind of my go-to. And that was like it for a really long time. PlayStation 3 turned into PlayStation 4. And I owned an Xbox for like 3 months. Like, got rid of it. I was like, these games are boring to me. I don't really care. But it was because of story, right? I got into different style story game. Borderlands is a huge one of them. I never got into shooters. I never owned a Call of Duty game. I never owned a Halo game when I had the Xbox. I didn't get into racing games except for Mario Kart. I didn't get into fighting games except for Super Smash Brothers. I didn't get into any of those. I was all about story. And, when I would get into these war games, I was like, oh, sweet. I was into the campaigns, and I'd play the campaigns. And I'm like, these are not fun, or they're really short. And because that's not why you get Call of Duty. You don't get it for the campaign. You get it for the online. And I'm like, I don't want to play online. I want to play next to my buddy, right? So I get in, I play stuff like Star Wars Battlefront 2. Oh, my gosh, we played that forever. And we'd split screen it and just play like crazy, because you could split screen and play next to someone. And like that for me, and will forever be the console gaming experience, is split screening and playing next to somebody. Not playing online with people, though I do that more and more now, but it's just that experience of being in the same room and playing video games. So at this point, right, I'm PlayStation, I have PlayStation device or PlayStation console, and I have a Nintendo, my handheld, which is the 3DS. And then there's this commercial. And I rocked a PlayStation console and a handheld Nintendo console pretty much for like 10 years. That was it. And I always would play the Nintendo more than I would play the PlayStation console. I play Pokemon, Zelda, what have you, Mario, any of it. I loved my Nintendo handhelds. And the DS, man, was so good. And the 3DS was so incredible. Anyway, here comes the life-changing. This was the next moment when the introduction of 3DS was pretty cool. When I played Ocarina of Time again on the 3DS, I was like, this takes me back to childhood. The awe and the shock that I had from seeing a game like Zelda Ocarina of Time was like reimagined in my mind playing it in 3D. I was like, this is so cool. Then there was the Nintendo Switch commercial, and that commercial blew my mind. I did not think they were going to be able to pull it off. And that's the biggest thing is I was like, dude, there's no way that they're going to be able to pull off this hybrid system. I mean, they went so fast. Like, they would dock this thing, and then they would pull it off, and then you could be able to play it, and then you could hand a Joy-Con to a friend. The idea of playing video games in the same room with somebody was, like, not only reintroduced, but, like, heavily expanded upon, and, like, the system was truly designed to feature that, like, couch co-op style play, and it like took everything from our childhood that I loved. The idea of being in the same room with a friend, the idea of playing video games next to somebody, and being able to play it however you want, whether it's on TV or on the go. As I said before, like I always had a handheld system, and the fact that I could consolidate and my Nintendo system could be both on TV and on the go was something that I just was like, I never thought that this was something that could happen. You know, like it was a dream, but like, you know, we kind of experimented with it a little bit with the like plug in your Game Boy to your GameCube kind of thing. And even then it was like super faulty. Although side point, I really enjoyed playing Crystal Chronicles that way. I just loved it so much. At any rate, it just was this like fantastic idea, and fantastic in the sense of like this great, huge, grand idea that I was like, I don't know how they're going to pull this off. There's just no way. This seems way too good to be true. And like for a while, quite honestly, like I had been disappointed with the video game world. Like I was just like, okay, I love this stuff, but like we're truly just like kind of iterating, not innovating. And so like PlayStation 2, 3, 4, 5, all of them are just like, they just get better, right? For me right now, the PlayStation 5 is the first PlayStation where I'm like, okay, I get it, right? They're doing something special with the controller, right? Or Xbox, I feel like just gets better, and better. Their services is what makes them, you know, really stand out. But Nintendo, they've always been that system that like every system that comes out is something different. Whether you like that or not, like it truly is. They don't look the same. I think the closest to that looked similar when it comes to controllers were the NES and the Super Nintendo, because the NES just increased, the Super Nintendo increased the amount of buttons. I mean, from Game Boy to Game Boy Pocket's the same, Game Boy Color is the same, they just added color, which was a pretty big deal. Game Boy Advance changed the game, Game Boy SP is still in Advance, and then from the DS all the way up to the 3DS, nothing had changed, right? We added a couple buttons here and there, a joystick, that's kind of weird, but nothing really had changed. So for a while, it just kept feeling like the same thing over and over again. And then when that commercial, as I said, dropped, everything changed. And then I got my hands on a Nintendo Switch and the new Zelda, and I took a few days off of work. I played it for hours on end, and I was immersed. And I had the same feeling again in my mid-20s that I had when I had played Ocarina of Time for the first time. And, you know, you may have your gripes about the Breath of the Wild, but when it first came out, it was a sight to behold, because all we had been getting for a while were just like remakes and remasters. And so this was a new game, and not only just a new game, but a new Zelda game. And to date, man, it was just, that experience was so unbelievable. And I go back into this game, and it was like the first time that with Zelda, I was like, man, I just want to log on and play the game just to be in the world, because it's so immersive. And to think that I could do that on my television, right? I could have this immersive experience on my TV and be like, yeah, this is so much fun. And then, you know, my buddy's like, hey, I'm working a shift at the coffee shop. Come chill, come through and just hang out like we do. And I was like, cool. I grab my Switch and I head over to the shop. He's man in a rush. Can't really talk anyway. I whip the Switch out and I can start playing. Like, it was just the the kind of the nail in the coffin for me, or not nail in the coffin, I guess it's a negative connotation. Like the last thing to be like, this is it. Being someone who likes video games can be something that is lifestyle, right? You just kind of bring it where you go, and it's a part of your day. And so my love for video games has kind of just come from this idea of being able to interact with this digital fantasy world whenever you want. And like, as I said, my tendencies haven't been towards like competitive shooters or multiplayers. It's always been towards that story. So the handheld experience that you get with a Nintendo Switch or with Nintendo products in general yield, a better experience when it comes to that story. And don't even know if that sentence made sense. Don't care. Moving on. So that's kind of just the history. That's like where it's all been like for me. And just to see what video games are doing and how they're kind of progressing. And as like this channel has grown, I've spent a lot of time playing all the systems, but there's just still one that kind of stands out to me, and that is Nintendo and the Nintendo Switch, because it has something special. It has the special sauce. It has that little element that kind of just like is just like, yeah, this is just part of your day. And I can't get over how amazing it is. So guys, thanks for sticking with me through this story, long story, first ever podcast episode. Again, if you guys are into it, absolutely into it, hit that subscribe button, be a part of this community. This is the best, most positive, mindful video gaming community out there. This is the podcast button mashers. Merch just dropped. I just got my sweatshirt in the mail. This podcast was shot in 3 different segments because my kid woke up. But I tried on the sweatshirt. It's amazing. You guys already saw the mug, the play mug. We got sweatshirts, t-shirts, and mugs. There's also a tumbler, like if you want a to-go mug, which I threw it in there because some people like that. Me personally, I got too many, so I wasn't gonna get another one. But yeah, grab some merch if you want it. And then you're going to see after this, we have a wonderful, awesome producer, a Player One. So you're going to see Player One's name. Huge shout out. I'm just going to give you the verbal shout out right now. Mindstormer, the man. I'm going to ask you after I've recorded this whether or not you want me to put Mindstormer or your actual name in the little category for the Player Ones. So thanks again, guys. Thanks for supporting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And most of all, keep playing and happy gaming.